The pressure mounts, the stress builds, and eventually the structure gives way. Everything you've built shatters into thousands of pieces, scattering into the void. We are taught to look at those scattered pieces and see an absolute ending. The standard assumption is that a collapsed life is a terminal state, a permanent condition of vulnerability where the pieces can never hold weight again. For the person who pushed you to that point, this is exactly the outcome they want. They watch the collapse with total confidence, certain that destroying your defenses means they have secured a definitive victory. But those scattered fragments don't have to represent an ending. When you clear away the debris of a collapsed building, you are left with an empty lot, a cleared construction site ready for a new build. The version of you that fell apart was transparent, fragile, and susceptible to outside pressure. It was a rough draft. And rough drafts exist to be torn up, to make room for the final version. This diagram shows how chaotic, scattered shards can smoothly snap into a highly organized geometric grid. These fractures aren't failures, they are blueprints. The destruction they caused acts as the painful, necessary first step of true psychological architecture. We call this self-breaking. It is the deliberate, calculated choice to actively dismantle your own psyche rather than waiting for an outside force to do it for you. You target your own structural stress points on your own terms. Taking ownership of the demolition immediately pulls the authority away from the attacker. They cannot claim a victory when you are the one holding the sledgehammer and directing the collapse. This grid uses diagnostic meters to measure exactly how much pressure was required to cause the failure. You study your own broken pieces to understand the original failure mechanics, mapping out every point where the previous version of you was vulnerable. Once you map out those structural flaws, the element of surprise vanishes. Any future adversary trying to exploit those specific weak spots will find that you already know exactly where the strike is landing. You transition from a target enduring an ambush into the lead engineer of your own deconstruction. The collapse is no longer something happening to you, it is a project you are actively managing. By lighting the match yourself, you ensure the adversary has no part in the outcome. You pull the power back to yourself, ensuring your survival depends solely on your own design. The demolition is over, and the site is clear. But the reconstruction phase we are about to enter is harsh. This is a violent, active process, entirely distinct from a quiet journey of healing. The raw materials for this new structure are not shipped in fresh. You gather the exact lies, the betrayals, and the deliberate doubts that were originally thrown at you. This is the forge, an environment where psychological pain is captured and repurposed as an extreme heat source. Every betrayal is thrown into a crucible and melted down, using the damage itself to power the reconstruction. This is a grueling, hardcore construction project. It requires sheer willpower to forcefully weld the plates together, engineering your own defenses rather than waiting for time to mend them. We are watching a complete structural phase transition, a process where a substance changes its state to become something more resilient. You leave behind the goal of gluing a transparent shell back together. Glass cannot survive this environment. Under this intense heat and pressure, the molecular structure reorganizes. What emerges from the forge is a new substance, heavy, dark, high-tensile steel armor. Surviving that overwhelming external assault forces a permanent psychological system upgrade. The transparent vulnerability of the past burns away, leaving an unbreakable defense mechanism in its place. Eventually, the adversary returns. They approach with the same arrogant swagger as before, operating on the assumption that they are facing the same fragile target they broke years ago. They execute their standard playbook. They attempt the same manipulation tactics and try to push the exact same psychological buttons that previously triggered your collapse. This impact test compares two versions of the self. Left, a kinetic surge shatters a translucent barrier. Right, the force hits a steel block and dissipates. Expanding the right side, consecutive strikes fail to penetrate. They hit the surface and immediately reflect back, completely harmless. Every deflected strike rings out. The failure of their tactics is visible to everyone, exposing how little influence they actually have over this new version of you. There is a deep irony in this result. By dedicating themselves to your destruction, the attackers supplied the heat and the pressure needed for the forge. They engineered the very thing they can never defeat. The power dynamic has completely inverted. The attacker is still relying on forces meant to shatter glass, but they are now striking high-density steel. Every impact only blunts their own tools, leaving them exhausted while your structure remains unmoved. The most dangerous force in any conflict is the unbreakable structure forced into existence by its enemy. All the leverage has transferred. This leaves one final question. What happens when the creation decides it is time to push back?